Atop a jagged cliff stands the silhouette of a man. Furious lightning flashes across the night sky, casting his features in shadow. Treacherous waves collide with the rock face below, spraying his cheeks with salt. Perhaps his face was already wet, but with tears or blood, who can say? His eyes are pitted, shoulders hunched, as if bearing an impossible weight no one but he can shoulder. Behind him, something dark looms. Perhaps it is a hideous truth he wishes to forget. Perhaps it is something in his past he can't face. Or perhaps it is his own shadow, cast wide like a scorch mark across the earth. Whatever it is, it haunts him, pushes him forward to the point of pathological compulsion. And here, standing not only in the tempest of the rain and the wind, but in the tempest of his own soul, we watch him, and we wait to see what he will do next. How can we do otherwise? The truth is, you know this man. He is mysterious but familiar. You fear him, yet you feel for him. You've watched him spiral into obsession 100 times before. Perhaps once as Victor Frankenstein, perhaps another time as Severus Snape, as Jekyll and Hyde, as Anakin Skywalker, Dr. Faustus, Holden Caulfield, Batman? He is the painfully romantic architect of his own torment, a figure so dramatic that you can hardly take him seriously, and at the same time so passionate that you can hardly will yourself not to. He is the Byronic Hero. Got a really great idea for a story but don't quite know how to put it all together? Well, there's a 12-part class you can take for free that I think will really help. It certainly helped me. Creating Unique and Powerful Worlds, taught by many-time author and professor of fiction, Lincoln Michel. Check the description to see how you can get access to it and finally get your story project going without spending a dime. A big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and giving us the opportunity to tell you about it. This class has been a special one for me, and I feel really lucky to get to share it with you this way. Definitely be sure to check it out. The Byronic Hero is a really interesting character archetype because unlike antiheroes and antivillains, its categorization has nothing to do with its morality. In fact, it's far closer to a tragic hero, with some fascinating quirks. The whole trope began with an 18th century writer named George Gordon Byron, far better known as, you guessed it, Lord Byron. This poet and notorious bad boy was once famously described by a past lover as mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Often, his hubris and passion were the direct source of the great struggles he'd faced throughout life. Before we ever had a term or conceptualization for it, Lord Byron was himself the living incarnation of the Byronic Hero. But the Byronic Hero actually takes its name from the many characters in Byron's works who take after him. They're arrogant, ruminative, misunderstood, somewhat obsessive. All these essential characteristics, when distilled, result in a character defined by his woeful demeanor and his single-minded pursuit of his obsessions. Unfortunately, these two traits tend to feed each other. Regrets, for the Byronic Hero, have a way of stacking up. His self-consumption, sooner or later, imperils his loved ones. Perhaps one of the earliest examples of this archetype comes from Byron's 1817 dramatic poem, Manfred. It's a heart-wrenching tale of a man seeking to forget the death of his lover, Astarte, whose fate he feels responsible for. He is gifted in all things supernatural, and somehow, although we're never told in detail, this leads to her doom. Calling on these same powers, he conjures every spirit and otherworldly being his magic can muster, demanding that they gift him with forgetfulness and banish the memory of her from his mind, saving him from his unending grief. At last, one of them calls up the spirit of Astarte herself, and Manfred finally realizes what must be done. "Say that thou loathes me not," he says to her, "that I do bear this punishment for both, that thou wilt be one of the blessed, and that I shall die, for hitherto all hateful things conspire to bind me in existence." Her reply, "Tomorrow ends thy earthly ills. Farewell." And she disappears. Manfred knows that this is an omen of his death, and that only in death will he finally be at peace. All of his pain not in the past, where it can still hurt him, still be remembered, but instead completely and utterly forgotten. This is one of the things that makes the Byronic Hero so tragic, what makes it impossible to look away from their obsessive spirals. Manfred is responsible for his lover's death, but that only deepens the anguish he feels at her loss. He is both tragic hero who meets a fateful demise, and sympathetic villain who broods endlessly over his transgressions. This duality is key to understanding the appeal of Byronic heroes. It's what elevates them, makes them more than just angsty teenagers in adult bodies. And Manfred is a gift to us in breaking that down because it paints the duality of the Byronic hero in two strikingly vivid strokes. First, when he feels he's being mocked by the immortal spirits that he summons, he rebuts them by saying, "The mind, the spirit, the Promethean spark, the lightning of my being is as bright, pervading, and far-darting as your own, and shall not yield to yours, though cooped in clay." The Promethean spark. He's of course referring to the Titan Prometheus of Greek myth, who created humans from clay and who stole fire from the gods for mankind. The gods repaid this act by chaining him up and condemning him to have his liver eaten for eternity by eagles. This now is how Manfred imagines himself. He, the gifted stranger among common folk, meddler of the esoteric and the forbidden, has called an anguish down upon himself from which he will never escape. And yet, it is with these same gifts that he seeks to undo it, drawing himself ever deeper into the spiral. His coercive will over the supernatural and tenacity in the face of all suffering, it's almost exultant. You might even call it heroic? Tragically heroic? The second key reference he makes comes later in the story when he finally accepts death as the only thing that can save him from his suffering. For, he reasons, his despair is so profound that it would make a hell of heaven itself, much less the rest of his mortal life. This is a direct reference to what is perhaps the most famous line from John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost. "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven." And the character who originally said it, the figure Manfred is invoking here? Why, Satan, of course, but a different version of Satan than the one you may be familiar with. In Paradise Lost, he's the ultimate sympathetic villain, an angel betrayed who becomes the archetypal traitor. You're made to feel empathy for him when he tempts Adam and Eve because he doesn't really want to. Destroying paradise pains him. So, consciously, he makes evil his good, inverting his morality so that he can do what must be done. Just like Satan, Manfred knows that this willful, arrogant path he's on will lead to his destruction. His last living conversation is with an abbot who asks him to reconsider. To this, Manfred says that the immortal mind is the origin of its own ill and end. He's already accepted his own fate, a step necessary to embrace all the implications of his obsession, that Promethean spark. It's all a bit poetic, but it's also one of the best early illustrations of what we mean by Byronic hero as an archetype. We can see in the reference to Prometheus, Manfred's role as the tragic hero of his own story, and at the same time, in the reference to Satan, his role as his own sympathetic villain. Together, these two halves create the perfect, dissonant storm for righteous obsessions and fatal outcomes. A hero who doesn't just do something for the right reason, rather, a hero who becomes that reason and would sooner self-annihilate than abandon it. So, we have a foundation for this character, but Manfred and Lord Byron are, by modern standards, a bit archaic. There's another model for the Byronic hero that's managed to reach through the ages, influencing media directly to this very day. A character whose author even originally called him the modern Prometheus. I'm talking, of course, about Victor Frankenstein. Known now as the quintessential mad scientist, Frankenstein was, originally, far less of a cackling lab maniac and far more of a Manfred. In their stories, both of them seek to understand the essence of life, even dominate it. But where Manfred seeks to escape eternity, Frankenstein seeks to harness it. He wields his abilities with science and alchemy, all the creative power he has over life and death, in the same way Manfred wields his supernatural arts. A defiant tool to steal fire from the gods, exercise his willpower over nature. And, interestingly, we see the Satan of this story, the sympathetic villain, literally emerge from his own two hands when he creates his famous monster. Frankenstein initially designs his creature to be beautiful, despite the fact that he's building it from dead bodies of both humans and animals, but blinded as he is by the glow of that Promethean spark within him, how could he have seen it otherwise? It isn't until the spark of life ignites within his creature that Frankenstein is struck with the horror of what he's achieved. He attempts to abandon his creation, but the monster becomes a curse that follows him throughout his life. Later in the story, during the creature's main section of the narrative, he teaches himself how to read using, of all texts, Milton's Paradise Lost. When he's finally reunited with his creator, filled with the angst of betrayal, he says to Frankenstein,
"I ought to have been thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel."
And with this statement, he completes the circle. Both Frankenstein and his monster are the tortured heroes of their own stories and the treacherous villains of each other's. I love this because it makes the poetry of Byron's Manfred so concrete. While Byron's hero experiences internal angst, the angst of Frankenstein and his creature are externalized in each other and played out through their mutual quests for vengeance. Frankenstein destroys what could have been the creature's bride, and the creature kills Frankenstein's betrothed on their wedding night. You literally get to see both halves of the internal struggle of the Byronic hero played out between them, physically. Secretly, I think this is one of the things that makes Frankenstein such a compelling, enduring tale. But there's a reason we've only been talking about Byronic heroes from the 19th century so far. The truth is, you don't really see many Manfreds in modern fiction. Even Frankenstein's reputation has dwindled to that of an educated madman. The closest thing we tend to get these days are antiheroes. And yes, technically a lot of antiheroes are also Byronic heroes, secretly tormented by the hard things that they have to do for the right reasons. In fact, a lot of characters we might mistake for antiheroes aren't actually antiheroes at all, like Batman, who is Byronically dark and brooding and internally tortured by his own convictions, but doesn't really do bad stuff the way that true antiheroes do. Always gritty and unfazed on the outside, modern Byronic heroes tend to lack something that both Frankenstein and Manfred have in spades: emotional vulnerability, a passion that boils over, utterly unchecked. The stormy cliff top in the night, the invocation of myths and deities. And frankly, I get it. It's dramatic, bordering on ridiculous, especially for modern sensibilities. The English Romantic period is behind us. We live in a world of oblique communication and memes. This behavior isn't exactly suited to taste. But there is one character in particular who people love, and I think it's because he manages to be both. One last Byronic hero I want to look at to really understand what this character can look like now. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Joel from the game The Last of Us. Joel was always sort of a gruff character, but the loss of his daughter's life, right at the start of the game, turns him into a calloused, guarded person, almost entirely indifferent to violence. And in the world of The Last of Us, which is a post-apocalyptic hellscape crowded over with fungus zombies and warring factions of survivors, that serves him well. Like any good anti-hero, his ambivalence toward necessary violence enables him to better protect the people he cares about, something he already failed to do once. Enter Ellie. Early on in the game, Joel meets a young girl who is just about the age his daughter was, and who is, mysteriously, immune to the zombie infection. He's tasked with escorting her across the country in hopes that her blood might hold the secret to finding the cure. We watch him pulling back from this burden, retreating even deeper into himself as Ellie, with her constant punning and undeniable friendliness, begins nevertheless to pull on his heartstrings. During their travels, she manages to wriggle past his tough exterior and into his heart, where everything still hurts, motivating him to hope against his better judgment, to become a dad again. And finally, that spark ignites and the passion comes pouring out. Joel becomes his own tragic hero who will scorch the earth with his shadow, hunting down whoever may harm his new surrogate daughter. Because, he realizes, this is the daughter he can save. Except, she's not his daughter. and his job isn't to save her. In the end, Joel has to make a choice between Ellie and the greater good. And in this moment, he turns from anti-hero to tragic villain. His evil becomes his good, and he gives up everything to save his own dead daughter through this girl who yet lives. He doesn't have to stand on a cliff top in a storm, doesn't have to conjure his Promethean spark, doesn't have to compare his inner struggle to the fall of Satan. He just has to utter the words, "Baby girl," for the first time in years, and we can see through instantly to the storm raging inside. So it's not just a romantic period poetry thing. The Byronic Hero has a very real place in modern fiction, but it's subtle. It's human. More than anything, this character touches the need to confront and exert one's will over that which weighs most heavily on the soul, the phantom of guilt, the curse of hubris, the tender scars of loss. It's easy to believe these things can simply be wrestled with, fought, controlled. But, ironically, as we've seen in our heroes throughout this video, that battle can become an obsession more destructive, more consuming than the pain itself ever was. In the end, Byronic Hero isn't facing his demons, he's simply facing himself. The tragic Promethean hero against the sympathetic Luciferian villain, a battle that almost always ends in mutual destruction. Manfred doesn't survive facing Astarte, Frankenstein doesn't survive his final confrontation with his creation. Even his creature barely survives. What kind of existence truly awaits him after killing Victor? And Joel? Well, his new obsession with preserving this, the ghost of his daughter, sends him into a cycle of destruction that neither he nor Ellie ever truly escape. For the Byronic Hero, it's not a dramatic flourish to climb out onto a high cliff face in the black of night as the tempest rages above the crashing waves. For this is the storm of his own soul, and he can do no else but face it. Such vain, misplaced hubris, and yet, one man against a raging storm? How can we help but watch? I recently found a 12-part video series called Creating Unique and Powerful Worlds, taught by many-time author and professor of fiction, Lincoln Michel. He walks you through how to begin your new world, what the ripple effects of that starting idea will be like across your world, how to create themes within your world, how to create characters to experience the world you've made, and then, finally, how to put all of these things together. The prospect of creating an entire world can be really paralyzing, but it doesn't have to be. This course will absolutely help you bring the size of the task down to something you can really understand and manage. I can say from experience that it is so liberating just to have a roadmap for a project like this. And thanks to our sponsor Skillshare, you can actually watch it for free. I personally would sign up for this course alone, but you'll also get access to thousands of other classes as well. Experts from pretty much every discipline have gathered there to share their knowledge and experience. There are classes on creative writing, illustration, fine art, animation, graphic design, film and video, pretty much anything you can imagine. You can even join in on live classes, connecting with other creatives and teachers while you learn. After talking with them about it, it seems like the people over at Skillshare can see why we're so excited about this world-building class, so they've decided to give you the opportunity to experience it and any other Skillshare class that catches your interest for free. This month, the first 1,000 Tale Foundry fans who join the Skillshare community will get not just the usual 15-day trial for free, but a full 30-day trial. An entire month of free learning and expert guidance on all the creative things you've ever wanted to do. Click the link in the description or the link right at the end of this video to get started. And I would definitely hurry because those slots are going to fill up fast. Once you've finished this class, Creating Unique and Powerful Worlds, please come back and tell us the impact it's had on you as a writer. I cannot wait to hear the success stories. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!